Shalom, shalom. To start this lesson off, I would like to give all the honor, all the glory, and praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Recha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who rule well and teach well, whose labors we have entered into. To the 144,000 and the rest of the chosen elect, to you I say shalom, and to the fellow servants, as well as any brothers and sisters that may be tuning in. May this lesson be edifying. This is the brother Halal from the Great Millstone branch of Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And this lesson will be going into, these Jakes, these 2/3, and their unyielding love for Esau Edom. In particular, these Jakes that have carnal riches, these Jakes that have been exalted in the entertainment industry, in multiple aspects, whether they be a, boxer, rapper, all of these different occupations that are centered around, entertaining the masses. And one common thing that you notice is that all of these different Jakes, though they have these trinkets and they have all of this money, material possessions, who is always seen in a higher position above them? Who are the people that own the labels that they sign to? Whose contract did they sign? And it all goes back to Esau Edom, and in particular the Amalekites, which are the tiny tops, man. These Jakes that run wild in the entertainment industry, they all sign contracts, and they're all have signed under labels that are controlled by the people that are oppressing them, man. And while they may, have this tough attitude when it comes to going against their own people, when it comes to Esau Edom, the self-proclaimed white man, the ones that's giving them this money, their attitude changes. So I wanted to let this video play, highlighting what I was just speaking on, the unyielding love that these Jakes have for Esau Edom. This Jake is going to rebuke these Jakes in the entertainment industry, that essentially sold out, that sold themselves for naught. So I'm going to let this video play, and we'll interject with a few scriptures and make this lesson.
I swear to white Jesus, I hate Lil Baby, and I hate every rapper like him. Does anybody remember when his bitch ass was hugged up with Michael Rubin? Then when it's time for him to hug the little princess, he got a gun in his hoodie. Where was that gun with Michael Rubin? They all a bunch of clowns, a bunch of cucks. Rick Rubin is black people's favorite slave master. Russell Simmons gonna sit here and be hugged up with everybody's favorite slave master, and then gonna make that spoof sex tape about Harriet Tubman having sex with the slave master. Leor Cohen is black people's favorite slave master. Leor Cohen was the one who broke up Public Enemy, beefing with Professor Griff. The conflict between Cohen and Griff centered on the 1989 antiseptic remark made by the Public Enemy member, which created intense pressure on Cohen, then a young juicy executive at Def Jam Records. Remember, Griff was the Public Enemy in Public Enemy, not coon-ass Chuck D, who was hugged up with everybody's favorite juicy, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the biggest juicy out there, and y'all love y'all juicy slave masters. Ask Chuck D. Flavor Flav was not a Public Enemy. Here's Flavor Flav hugged up with another juicy Paul Simon. But let me go back to Jew Z and Liar Cohen. Remember when Irv Gotti, Jay Prince, Dame Dash, and Suge Knight were about to start their own distribution company and cut the juicy out of the whole situation? Liar Cohen, a major corporate executive in hip-hop, has had several documented tensions and conflicts with industry moguls representing a more independent approach, specifically Dame Dash, Suge Knight, Irv Gotti, and Jay Prince. The core of these conflicts often center on the tensions between corporate industry practices and artist empowerment/independence. Remember, your slave master don't want you to leave the plantation. The feud between Dame and Liar is a long-standing industry conflict spanning over 2 decades, rooted in the breakup of Rockefeller Records, just like he did with Public Enemy. Differing views on business, which is independent, and accusations of culture vulture behavior. The juicy is your favorite slave master and you love him. Stop the cap. Black people love slavery. Slavery was brought to you with a real good tune produced by Clive Davis. Remember, Clive Davis was the one who signed Whitney Houston. And then Clive Davis partied with her dead body. Clive Davis held his annual pre-Grammy party on February 11th, 2012 at the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel just hours after Whitney Houston was found dead in her room upstairs. While not partying with the body, Davis faced criticism for proceeding with the event, which he turned into a tribute for Houston. Houston didn't want that tribute. She wanted a moment of silence for her death, not a
And that's pretty much all that needs to be said. But as this Jake explained in the video, we have all these, these rappers that portray this hyper masculine image, the tough guys, the gun toters, the ones toting the AK-47s and the Drakes. And when it comes down to it, who do they always find themselves being subservient to? Esau, Edom. And particularly, the Jake mentioned, the Amalekites, referring to them as juicy. Pause. But he's using it as a different term rather than calling them, the ish, the JOW ish people. But they are the ones who control these labels that these rappers sign to. And they're always under them. They never have any, they rarely have anything to say to their true oppressor. And like, as it was explained in the video, when you had those Jakes that wanted to make an independent label that was, so-called black owned, really Israelite owned, it was rejected. And then the Jake said, what? The slave master doesn't want you to control the plantation. And that's true. Esau Edom doesn't want Jakes to be a true sovereign, not in his kingdom. And unfortunately, due to the curses and the conditions that we're currently in, we have been trodden under the foot of our enemy, to the point where now Jake has a psychological, attachment to Esau Edom, despite all the things that this man has done to us, man. Or what they call, Stockholm syndrome. A complete dependency on those who are oppressing you. But this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 2 and 14. And it says, is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? And unfortunately, the answer to this question for the majority of our people right now in this modern day is yes, man. Our people have been trodden down under the foot of our enemies to the point where they now have a psychological attachment to Esau Edom. They always want to be around them. They'll never stand up to them or rebel against their enemy. There have been several small rebellions, so to speak, but what successful rebellions have been led to overthrow Esau in the last 30, 40 years, man? These curses are no joke. And the only way that we're going to be able to defeat this man is by leaning on Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah. Without the Lord, we are a prey. That's why in the book of Isaiah 41, we were referred to as what? A worm. A worm is a defenseless creature. Verse 15, it says, the young lions roared upon him and yelled and made his land waste. His cities are burned without inhabitant. And that's referring to the heathen besieging our cities and, taking all the glorious vessels and bringing us into captivity. And then in verse 16, it says, also the children of Noph and Tahaphanes, Salaki, if I not know how to pronounce this particular word, Tahaphanes, I think that's how it's pronounced, have broken the crown of thy head. And then in the NOT it says, Egyptians marching from their cities of Memphis and Tahaphanes have destroyed Israel's glory and power. Going back to the KJV in verse 17, hast thou not procured this unto thyself, and that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy power when he led thee by the way? So, ultimately, because of us forsaking Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, because of that covenant that we broke with the Lord that was explained to us, in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 15 on down. The Lord told us what would happen if we broke our covenant with him. And what did we do? We broke the covenant, man. Daniel 9 and 11, we have transgressed the law by departing. Therefore, the curse has came upon us, man. And now our people have the mentality of being subservient to their oppressors, man. As everyone around watches and wonders, wow, why do these niggas still have love for the people that have been continuously fucking them over for the last couple centuries? Ever since these devils have ascended back into power. But let's go down to, of course, verses 32 and 33. It says, can a maid forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire? And this is a rhetorical question. Of course, a maid would not forget her ornaments, and a bride wouldn't forget her attire. It says, yet my people have forgotten me days without number. Our people have forgotten Yahweh by Shema Shah. They've revolted and gone. The majority of our people chose to be under these heathen and worship these idols rather than leaning upon the true power that has done nothing but look out for them over these last few years. Even when they didn't appreciate it, man. Like the scriptures, like where the Lord didn't want to, really have mercy on Israel for a time, but then it says what? He remembered his covenant. Hey, in the book of Isaiah, let's see. This is Isaiah 1 and 9. It says, except the Lord of hosts had left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been in Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. So the initial conclusion of us breaking the covenant with the Lord is that we will be completely wiped off the face of the earth, man. But instead, the Lord allowed the curse to come upon us. And what is one of the biggest curses? One of the worst curses that we're subject to? Being under our enemies, man. Being under captivity in their land, having to abide by their laws, statutes, and commandments. Under threat of being arrested, thrown into prison and or killed. That is the curse that has befallen our nation. And it's going to take divine heavenly intervention to remove that curse and restore us back to our glory, man. To our godhood. But going back to verse 32. Matter of fact, verse 33, I already read the previous verse. It says, verse 33, it says, why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? Therefore thou hast also taught the wicked thy ways. And these jakes, man, in the world, they embody, trimming their ways to seek love. Doing whatever they can in their power to win over their oppressors that have done nothing but mistreat them, man. And then it says what? Therefore thou hast also taught the wicked thy ways. So, Esau, Edom, now that he knows that the majority of these jakes have what is Stockholm syndrome, he takes advantage of that. And he uses it to get Jake to follow after him and abide by whatever laws he pushes forth. And the sellouts of our people willingly follow it. No matter what happens, as long as they have a comfortable lifestyle, as long as they have, these trinkets, as long as they have money, a car, some voluptuous, women with big asses, they won't complain and say a word, man. Let's see, from there, let's get the book of Matthew, chapter 16. I already know where I'm going with this one. Verse 26, it says, for what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What's the point of gaining all this money, gaining this worldly glory, if it comes at a price of, being subservient to your enemy and, basically selling your soul through signing a contract, not you actually, giving up your soul, to Esau Edom, because when the spirit leaves the body, that's death. But in the sense of selling your life away, willingly abiding by what your enemy wants you to do, rapping about, murder. You can look this up. In 1991, a bunch of Edomite government liaisons and private prison investors held a private meeting with rappers, and they told the rappers to make music that encouraged criminal behavior. This was way back in 1991, and what happened after that? The NWA, gangster rap, exploded over the East Coast and West Coast. You had the West Coast versus the East Coast war. Then further on down the line in the mid '90s, it went down south. Areas like Memphis, with that creepy ass, that creepy ass music that came out of Memphis, man. What is the point of gaining the whole world if you lose your own soul, man? When you sell your soul to the devil and he has you promote all of these things. And the music may sound good, to the ears. I'll admit it. But it comes at a major price, man. It says, or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? And in the NLT it says, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? The answer is no. Matter of fact, hold on. Matter of fact, hold on. 1 Corinthians 6:20, it says, matter of fact, let me start at verse 19. It says, what? Know ye not that your body is of the temple of the Holy Spirit, which is in you, which ye have of the Most High, and ye are not of your own? So, hey, we belong to the Lord, man. What do we look like being subservient to our enemies? Trying to be under them. Looking up to them as the master when we have the one true power, the one true sovereign creator of all the things that we've ever seen or interacted with, man. Verse 20, it says, for ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify the Most High in your spirit and, therefore glorify the Most High in your body and in your spirit, which are the Most High. So we belong to the Lord. And that's a great thing. The fact that we belong to the Lord, the all-knowing and all-powerful, that we can make intercession to him and pray to him, that our prayers go up to the heavens and to the ears of Yahweh Bashim Shai and the angels, man. It is a beautiful thing, but our people, these 2/3, the undesirables of Israel, they would rather continue to be under their enemies rather than get right and serve Yahweh Bashim Shai. And that's what's going to lead to death. It is the book of Isaiah, chapter 52 and 3. It says, for thus saith the Lord. Matter of fact, let me start at 2. It says, shake thyself from the dust and arise, and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. For thus saith the Lord, ye have sold yourselves for naught, and ye shall be redeemed without money. And that's exactly what these jakes in the entertainment industry have done. They have sold themselves for naught. And in this particular verse, when it says ye have sold yourselves for naught, it's not literally saying that, that the Israelites actually, sold themselves into slavery. It's figuratively. How did they sell themselves for naught? By willingly being under these heathen. That is how these jakes have sold themselves for naught. And in the same way they did it in the ancient world, the Maccabees, when they said that Salaki, the same way that they sold out, back in the Maccabees when you had the wicked Israelites that willingly bowed down under the Greek Seleucid Empire that was being controlled by Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth at the time. And it's the same way that they do it today. They willingly accept the oppression of the enemy, man. So I ended off with Zephaniah chapter 1 and 12. And it says, Zephaniah 1 and 12, and it says, and it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with candles and punish the men that are settled on their lees, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. So the Lord is about to search out our people. And he's going to punish those who are, like it says in the NLT, complacent, who are comfortable being under Esau, Edom, not comfortable living a sinful lifestyle adverse to the laws, statutes, and commandments that have been ordained by Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. And when you go into the word lees, it's the Hebrew word shamar, and it goes into lees or the dregs. It doesn't really go into it very much. It just says, dregs. So I went to Google and I typed in, what does dregs mean figuratively? For more insight for those who may not have an understanding of what it means. And it says, the AI overview in Zephaniah 1 and 12, the metaphor of wine left. It didn't say, it said men left settled in their leaves. It didn't say wine left on its dregs. But I'll go straight to the point. It says, it symbolizes extreme spiritual apathy, complacency, and stagnant and sinful living. It says the prophet is addressing people in Jerusalem who have become so self-satisfied in their prosperity that they believe the Most High is distant and inactive. And that's the attitude of these jakes, man. Oh, the Lord ain't coming back. Y'all been saying they've been saying that since my granny, since I was a little kid, they've been saying the Lord gonna come back and he ain't came yet. That's the spirit of our people. They deny the prophecies. They deny the power of our Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. And they would rather live a sinful life and be complacent in their sins, being under the enemy, than to actually walk the right path, man. It says what in ancient winemaking, wine was meant to be poured from vessel to vessel to strain off the dregs, sediment, or lees. If left too long, the wine became thick, bitter, and spoiled. It says these people are not poured. It says they have settled into their ways, becoming thickened, hardened, and useless in their sins. So they're okay with living a sinful lifestyle. They're okay with, committing all manner of adultery, selling out to the enemy. And that's what's going to lead to these 2/3 getting destroyed, man. Sellouts will not make it. So I hope this lesson was edifying. And with that, I want to give all honor, glory, and praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rachak, Wadash, that belongs to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Kwam Yasha'Allah, Wa, Abba, Baba, and I'll see you on the next lesson. Lord's will. Shalom.